Hi, and welcome to our first session of wholesaling real estate. The very first thing we need to talk about is the structure of your business, the legal structure of your business. There are four options that you have when you set up your business, and we're going to go over them and the pros and cons of each of those four structures. The first is you can have a sole proprietorship, which means it's you. You don't file any legal documents with the state. It's you when you do your tax return. It's a Schedule C. It's a business that you have running for yourself. Another structure is a C corporation. This is a more complicated situation, and we will go over more of the detail of a C corporation. Another structure is an S corporation. And finally, a structure that many people find to be the best way to go as far as setting up a business is concerned is an LLC. And that means it's a limited liability company. So let's take a look at each of these structures. And in some of them, I'm going to give you my own opinion, but the final decision is really going to be yours. Okay? Sole proprietorship, it's easy. It's all about you. You don't have to file anything special within your state. Most states you have to go to the Secretary of State's office for some other form of business and establish yourself that way. But the problem with a sole proprietorship is that you're going to find a lot more liability, personal liability. You can't get away from it. So if somebody were to sue you for something that they thought was negligent, or even a lawsuit that had no merit to it, you're the one that's on the hook. Okay? It's your personal assets that are going to be attacked. Personally, I do not recommend setting up your business in this industry as a sole proprietorship. The next one I want to briefly mention is the C corporation. Now, a C corporation you establish through your state. I'm in Connecticut. We do it through the Secretary of State's office. You have to register the company. You have to make sure there's no other company that has the same name as yours. C corporation has stock. Stock is distributed to the stockholders. Obviously, you have to state when you set it up how many shares of stock you have and how many are going to be issued, or maximum number you can issue. Also, one of the problems with a C corporation is not only is it stock, not only is the detail of record keeping a little more tedious, but the C corporation is actually taxed on its own as if it were an individual. So taking that a little bit further, let's say you set up your business as a C corporation and you own all the stock in the corporation. Now you become an employee of that corporation. So when that corporation earns money and makes a profit, that profit is taxed under the corporate structure. Now you pull a salary out of that corporation. Now your salary is taxed as well. And one of the things the IRS really looks for in C corporations, particularly the small ones, they want to look at it, and there's a difference between issuing a dividend on your stock holdings or making a loan to your company and then getting the loan payment back and being viewed as an employee. So those are things you really need to think about. I've had a C corporation. I found it cumbersome, and it's just, in my personal opinion, not the way to go with something like this with wholesaling. The next corporation is an S corporation. S corporation is not taxed by itself. The S corporation income flows through to the stockholders, so that The stockholders get taxed as individuals, and there's no tax on the S corporation. The S corporation has certain restrictions. It also has the restriction that there can't be any foreign stockholders. It's still stock you have to issue, okay? And you still have to be concerned about some of the paperwork involved, some of the details you have to keep on minutes, things of that nature. The final one, which is the one that I've chosen as what I think is the best way to go, is the LLC, the Limited Liability Company. You set this up, again, as an example, in Connecticut. You'll file articles of organization with the state, Secretary of State's office, that establishes your company. In each one of these situations, including the LLC that I'm discussing now, you have to go to the IRS, fill out a form, get a tax identification number. It's a federal employer identification number. That doesn't mean you have to have employees. It's nothing more than you getting a social security number. So each business has to have its own federal employer identification number. Now with an LLC, much easier to do. You have limited liability, just as you would with a corporation. The beauty of the LLC is also like a subchapter S corporation. You're taxed as an individual. The LLC is not taxed as an entity by itself. The profits flow through to you as an individual. Now, one of the things about an LLC is that the IRS gives you some time when you set up an LLC to convert to an S corporation. After a certain amount of time has passed, it's a little bit more difficult to switch over from an LLC to an S corporation, but you do have some time up front to decide whether you want to get into being an S corporation. So now let's take a quick look at the differences between the C corporation, the S corporation, and an LLC. On all three, the owners have limited liability for business debts and obligations. It's a state-level registration that usually protects the company name as well as personal liability from any problems, legal problems that may come up. Perpetual business duration. Unless you go back and dissolve the business, it's perpetual. Most states you have to have some type of an annual report. Yes, they will charge you for that, and they also have a setup fee for whichever type of organization you choose. Unlimited number of owners. That's only true in the C corporation and the LLC. Generally, the S corporation, you're not going to have to worry about how many members. It's been 100 members. What you might have to be concerned with is the fact that under the S corporation, the owners need to be U.S. citizens or residents. Maybe you have somebody from a foreign country that you're dealing with. Very unusual that you run into issues with any one of these structures. So the other thing with an S corporation is it cannot be owned by other businesses, okay? It's got to be owned by an individual such as yourself. Now, one of the things I like about the LLC is that I've had multiple layers of LLCs. For example, I have a master LLC. If I go and I buy a particular house, I may set that up under a different LLC. Then I buy another house or group of houses, that becomes a new LLC. But who owns those other LLCs is my master LLC, and then I own the master LLC. So you could have multiple layers of LLC, which it costs a little bit more money, but it also provides you with that extra layer of protection of your assets, okay? The C corporation and the S corporation, you issue stock on, as I had mentioned earlier. Now, you have stock certificates, you take minutes of meetings, things like that. LLC, I also like to have meeting structures. You could have one meeting, but the LLC, rather than stock, you have a membership certificate that you can set up. It's either in units or percentage of ownership. And you also have something called an operating agreement, which is a detailed layout of what the business is about, who is part of the business, what happens with somebody leaving or adding a new member, the details of the business. And a lot of people who set up an LLC just neglect the operating agreement. You really need to make sure that you have an operating agreement, whether it be to introduce a partner into the LLC or whether the IRS calls you in for an audit. You could at least show them that you've structured everything properly and what the operating agreement shows as the detail of how the business is being run. As far as reporting business profits, you do that as an individual or on your personal tax returns in the S corporation and the LLC. As I said earlier, the C corporation is taxed as if it was an individual on its own. So those are the structures that you can choose. Again, I will reiterate, since the development of LLCs, it makes things a lot easier for us as individuals or small business owners to set up a business that has some limits to personal liability. So that's my personal choice, but it's up to you. Again, I had mentioned that you can convert an LLC to an S corporation early on. That's another consideration. Talk to your tax professional and your attorneys about it. Thank you and have a great day.